There you go, slide 2.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Sorry, apologies for the...
Hey, no worries. Thanks, Jane. We're approaching, well, we're in year 4 of a 5-year program in OPP, and it's a $1.5 billion program. And some of the funding highlights, you can see it goes into 8 core areas, but some of the funding highlights were about $278 million for improved emergency preparedness and response. And these funds increase our on-scene environmental response capacity and improve oil spill response plans by working with local communities. Additionally, another $338 million invested towards ecosystem conservation, and funding has gone towards addressing threats to marine mammals, such as our southern resident killer whales, or SRKW, and it protects them, or helps protect them from vessel noise and collisions. And also money in that box went into removing abandoned and derelict vessels. $207 million went towards marine prevention with safer navigation and vessel tracking. And as well, $81 million is allocated to engage Canadians and to establish partnerships with Indigenous groups. And a lot of our work here on the Pacific Coast, we're running a lot of pilots for the Ocean Protection Plan, and we're working in partnership with our Indigenous communities. So next slide, please.
Got it?
You bet. Okay, so OPP is built on 4 themes, and this first theme we're going to talk about here is prevention. And to improve our marine safety system and prevent marine incidents, there's a bunch of initiatives we're doing. I'll just mention a few of them. One is Enhanced Maritime Situational Awareness, or EMSA, and I'll talk in more detail on that on the next slide. But we're also spending a bunch of resources into modernizing and improving our hydrography and our charting. The initiative started in key areas, high traffic, commercial ports, etc., and waterways to improve navigation safety. And also increasing the amount of weather information available in high traffic marine areas. And then on the kind of the nature side of things, we're also doing marine bird monitoring, and we've tracked about 1,200 kilometers of at-sea marine bird abundance and distribution information along the coast. So next slide, and I'll talk a little bit more about EMSA. So EMSA, this is a really interesting project. It's a web-based geographic near real-time information system that's totally customizable by the user, and it provides Indigenous and coastal communities and other key partners with access to marine information, including marine shipping movements. We've partnered with 13 Indigenous pilot partners, or host nations as we call them, across Canada to develop the system. They designed the system, they decided what components were going to be in the system, and it was our Indigenous partners that actually chose the service provider, Fujitsu Canada, who built the system. We get ongoing feedback from our pilot partners. In fact, we have a weekly video conference with the users. And Fujitsu Canada is also at those meetings, and we hear what's working, how we can improve things, and in almost a week's time, the amendments to the system are made. So we are, like I said, we have 13 pilot partners, but we have almost an unlimited number of licenses. So if an organization such as a Port Authority wants a license so they can view the information, we can certainly make that available. And we have a lot of organizations, of course, marine-based organizations, but also provinces and science organizations like Oceans Network Canada, etc., who are using the system. It's also part of the TMX Kinder Morgan pipeline accommodations measures, where we equip 3 more Indigenous groups with the EMSA system. On to the next slide. And with regards to response, as you may know, strengthening our marine emergency response and increasing protection of our coastal environments and Canadians at sea is a key theme, of course, for OPP. And just going to make sure my slides are up to date here. I'm going to talk a little bit about response planning to places of refuge and increased towing capacity. And we'll start with a little bit of look at what we're doing with our emergency towing capacity here on the West Coast. So next slide, please, Jane. Okay, so OPP has accomplished a great deal on improving tow capacity, and our main partner on this, of course, is Canadian Coast Guard. We have 2 emergency offshore towing vessels on contract, and they're operating on the BC coast. And in addition to that, we've got 51 new tow kits located on Coast Guard vessels or on shore-based caches. So these can be deployed if a vessel starts to get into trouble along the coast. The lease on the emergency towing contract runs out in November 2021, and there are 7 one-year options to renew. These 2 towing vessels can potentially be in place until at least 2028. But we've got to go through that process and look at the options. There was a needs assessment that was done. It's now complete. And after looking at the towing needs assessment, Transport Canada will be conducting a risk assessment that is national in scope. So it will accommodate all 3 of our coasts, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and of course the Arctic. And it will also deal actually the 4th, the Great Lakes Central area as well. We expect the risk assessment to be completed within about a 3-year timeline. And we are about to start it, but we haven't established the date just yet. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so the Oceans Protection Plan also aims to preserve and restore marine ecosystems that are vulnerable to increased marine shipping and development. Through the plan, we are preserving and restoring vulnerable marine ecosystems, helping to protect marine mammals, again, like the SRKW, working towards reducing the impact of day-to-day vessel traffic by learning from scientific research, but also local knowledge of Indigenous communities and other coastal residents. We've increased the number of fisheries officers to support lead responders and enforce the law during incidents. So initiatives in this area include the abandon and erect vessels and associated new legislation attached to that. So with our partners at Canadian Coast Guard, we're developing inventories of problem vessels and working to connect registration to boat owners throughout the life cycle of the vessel. The Abandoned Boats Program, which has already helped over 20 communities access funding to remove and dispose of wrecked boats and to educate owners on how to manage boats at the end of life. And work is well underway on the cumulative effects of marine shipping and the southern resident killer whale. So let's just move on to the next slide and we'll have a quick look at cumulative effects of marine shipping. So our SEMS, as we call it, a marine shipping initiative, has been busy over the past few months. Work is underway in 6 pilot sites around the country, and 2 of them are on the west coast of British Columbia, one in the north and one in the south. In the north coast, we're working under the Reconciliation Framework Agreement governance structure in the Northern Shell bioregion. And collectively, a project charter and work plan have been developed, and the study area and pathways of effects have been chosen. We're now working on collecting data to further the assessment. On the South Coast, OPP has partnered with the First Nations Fishery Council, or FNFC, to enable First Nations participation in OPP initiatives. Through early discussions with FNFC coordinating committees, and as well as the Manault Nations Fishery Council and WSÁNEĆ Leadership Council, we've heard a lot of interest in this initiative, and we're looking forward to progressing this work. As things progress, we'll continue discussions with the province as well, province of BC, on linkages and complementary work, such as marine spatial planning. TC is also making progress on the development of a national cumulative effects framework, which incorporates input from Indigenous groups, industry, government, and the public. The next version of the draft framework will be shared publicly shortly, and when it is out, you're of course welcome to provide your input. So we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, SRKW. So Canada is committed to protecting endangered whales, southern resident killer whale on the west coast, the right whale on the Atlantic coast, and also the St. Lawrence beluga. So on the west coast, the SRKW has three main threats to its survivability. One is lack of prey. They have a tendency to enjoy Chinook salmon, and they really do stick to Chinook salmon. And when those stocks are low, of course, the food availability is reduced considerably. The other thing is acoustic and physical disturbance. So vessel movement and vessel sounds, underwater sounds, impacts their ability to find prey, to hunt prey, but also communicate as a pod. And then we have the general contaminants threat, which you can think of everything from pollution in the water to plastics in the water. Excuse me. So to address these threats in the short term, measures were developed for the 2019 and 2020 seasons. And when I say seasons, the SRKW are not in our waters 12 months a year. Normally they arrive May to June, and they're here till mid-September, sometimes until the beginning of October. So it's basically our summer seasons where we see the SRKW. And to help protect them, we included 3 interim sanctuary zones, which vessels were not allowed to enter in. They're currently active now. And they are areas where SRKW are known to congregate, to forage for food, to rest, and also, of course, communicate with the pods. We've also limited how close folks can get to the SRKW if they're in a vessel, and it's 400 meters, and as well a numerous number of fishery closures to help ensure that supply of food for the whales. So in the longer term, TC will be working with an external contractor to examine the feasibility of modifying shipping lanes as a way to reduce physical and acoustical disturbances from vessels. We have, on a temporary basis, had voluntary movement within shipping lanes, and we found great success on reducing noise to the SRKW. So we're looking at, is that something we can do on a permanent basis in the future? And we're also on domestically and internationally working with partners to promote quieter ship design. And we are supplying quite a bit of seed money into the development of power plants and propellers and things like that, and ship hull designs in order to reduce noise. And we're also, of course, encouraging ports to adopt programs that are very similar to what Vancouver Fraser Port Authority and the Port of Prince Rupert have with regards to quiet ships and technologies. Our biggest partner for the large vessels on noise, of course, is the ECHO program, which is a Vancouver Fraser Port Authority program, specifically looking at reducing the threats to SRKWs. And there are currently 3 slowdowns for large vessels. Large vessels are asked to be at either 11.5 or 14.5 knots going through Boundary Pass, Herald Strait, and as of August 1st, Swiftsure Bank as well. And it's voluntary, and we've right now, at the last count, we had approximately 86% participation rate, which we're very, very pleased with. And next slide. Okay, one of the other pillars that OPP is based on is making decisions not politically motivated, but rather with a stronger evidence base. And of course, that is including expanded research on oil spills. So next slide, please. Okay, so under the OPP initiative on strengthening our understanding of how oil products behave in water, our partner Department of Fisheries and Oceans is leading a $7.5 million 5-year sub-initiative to expand research on fate behavior and biological impacts of oil spills. This work will expand our ability to predict fate behavior and impacts of petroleum products and will generate new information on the biological effects and potential impacts of petroleum products to aquatic organisms. Similarly, we have a MPRI, which is a multi-partner research initiative. It's a $45 million 5-year research program supporting scientific collaborations to advance oil spill research in Canada. And the MPRI science is helping address gaps in oil spill response and remediation strategies that will support the development, validation, and Canadian regulatory approval of ARMS, which is alternate response measures on the operational scale. So the MPRI has built a research network bringing together the best scientific expertise in oil spill research, both nationally and internationally. Next slide, Jane. And you know, the other main pillar, or one of the main pillars in OPP is building Indigenous partnerships and also building partnerships with coastal communities. So last year, Transport Canada launched a new program to fund Indigenous partnerships called the Indigenous and Local Communities Engagement and Partnership Program. We call it ILSEP because of the original name, just a little bit too long. But it's designed to build capacity and relationships for ongoing participation of our Indigenous partners in the marine safety system. So they participate in long-term engagement work on one or more OPP initiatives. And in BC, we have 7 partnership projects that are funded for 3 years on the south coast of BC through 2021 for a total of $2.1 million, including 4 projects with the FNFC related to each of the OPP themes, as well as projects with WSÁNEĆ Leadership Council, Minult Treaty Society, and Nisga'a Listens Government. Transport Canada is working closely with each of these partnerships to identify priority interests and collaborate interdepartmentally for engagement purposes. But COVID-19 hit and certainly provided us with some challenges, but also some opportunities. As most of our First Nation Indigenous communities closed their territories to visitors as a result of COVID-19, we've had to leverage technology to connect with our partners at a time of crisis, and it's proven invaluable. So we've continued to meet with our partners online. We've hosted webinars. We tap into software programs. We use Teams most often. We use that within Transport, but we also use it for our external partners. And basically, we've not missed a beat, having held several workshops on specific initiatives within the last month alone. So COVID-19 has presented challenges, but it's also allowed us to think about the way we work together. We're working with our partners and listening to their concerns, from extending timelines to exploring more flexible approaches to spending money within agreements. So we are very sensitive to the needs of our partners, and we anticipate that more flexible approaches will be required as communities establish new priorities and dedicate staff and resources to addressing COVID-19. As you can imagine, any type of funding program it's pretty strict on when it gets rolled out, how it gets measured on its delivery and the results. And COVID-19, we've really had to kind of think outside the box to make those funding programs work with some of the challenges we've had. So beyond the established Indigenous partners, Transport Canada, as the federal lead for OPP engagement, continues to engage communities in BC. And we've been hosting coastwide dialogue forums to participating at conferences such as Clean Pacific or the Sailor Sea Conference, to also participating at PACMAR meetings, that's Pacific Coast Marine Advisory Review Panel meetings, and of course at meetings like we're having here today. We are always open to coming in and telling our story and answering any questions for those that are interested in what we're doing. Let's go on to the next slide, Jane. And knowing that there's not a lot of time left here. Okay, this is a really interesting one. One of the things we did is we launched a Marine Training Program, or MTP. And the MTP provides federal funding to expand traditional e-learning and blended learning programs at Canada's marine training schools. These funds facilitate access to basic marine training for underrepresented groups, and specifically targeting Indigenous peoples and women. And here on the West Coast, we've partnered with BCIT in Vancouver, in North Vancouver, and Camosun College on Vancouver Island. And we've already had 3 cohorts, about 29 Indigenous students from BCIT graduate. Many of the students have gained employment with BC Ferries, Canadian Coast Guard, Seaspan, and West Coast Launch. And BCIT is currently running their 4th cohort, and it's an all-female cohort, which is just super. Camosun College's first cohort had 11 women and 1 Indigenous man, and they've completed the program. They're just waiting for an opportunity to write final exams, and they need a technical solution for that because the folks are in their Indigenous communities, and travel to and from those is limited right now. So we are still active in the MTP program, but we are on a bit of a slowdown just because of COVID-19 and the technical needs to engage, excuse me, outside of the face-to-face. Next slide. Okay, some of the other OPP linkages, you know, as we are oh, there you go. As we are developing our OPP initiatives, as you said, there's over 50 of them. Jane, there was actually, I think, 58 when we started. A lot of them are completed, but what we try to do is put them to practice, and things like potential expansion of EMSA or Exercise Galitas, which was a simulated stricken cruise ship at the north of Vancouver Island. It took place off of Port Hardy, and we partnered, of course, with U.S. Coast Guard, Canadian Coast Guard, a lot of land-based responders. BC Ferries supplied us with one of their ferries. It was at the end of the season, returning back down to the southern coast. And, you know, we got to try out a lot of initiatives like places of refuge and things like that. So we're actually putting it to good use. And I think we'll go to the next slide. And there you go. So please continue to connect with us. Like I say, we love to participate in events like this and come out and tell our story. And there are some links to us on our websites. You can go to Let's Talk OPP and hear a lot about what we're doing. You can get the whole picture on our Oceans Protection Plan website that shows all of the initiatives we are doing. So with that, Jane, I think I'll say thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about Oceans Protection Plan. Certainly open to questions if you have time, but thank you for listening.